Hello, everybody. Welcome back for the our quarterly WellCents financial wellness show for the fourth quarter. It's great to see everybody again. Thanks for making the time as always. Today I have a new co-host joining me today, my colleague Jamie Hayes from Florida. I'm actually down in Florida myself for some business, so both coming from you from the same general area. But I'll let her introduce herself and we'll get going. But lots to discuss here, obviously, in the fourth quarter. It's an election year, year-end items for financial planning we'll talk about that are probably going to help people wrap up their year. But we'll go through all that. But and one more item of business is our employer code for those of you who receive employer credit for this. This on this show is pumpkin spice, so make sure you put that down so make sure you guys get credit. And I will throw it over to Jamie to introduce herself.
Nobody could crack that code. Pumpkin spice for October. Perfect. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. Happy Wednesday. My name's Jamie Hayes. I'm Senior Vice President of NFP Retirement. I work with many of your employers to ensure that you have the best, most effective, and successful retirement plan for your future. I also work with Brian and his colleagues on the financial wellness and WellCents side to ensure you guys are getting the best services that you need and that you're all getting the right financial plan so that you can be more financially secure in your day-to-day financial worlds. Happy to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So again, for those of you who haven't joined us before, again, the goal here is just unbiased, good information to help all those on the call. Again, most of you are joining us either from our 401k plans that we manage at NFP or our group benefit plans or some way, shape, or form, and coming to us. So, we like to try to make these very interactive. So again, I would implore you and push you, make sure you're sending messages in the chat, and Jamie and I will make sure we address those. Again, our job is to make sure you leave here, hopefully with some valuable information to take back and just continue to, increase your wealth creation and your financial planning and optimize it as best as you can. So, just go right into it, right? The fourth quarter, we got a lot going on this time in the fourth quarter, right? We got some elections happening, I think, in a couple weeks. That's kind of been a tear for the country as far as what side you fall on and how that's going to play itself out. Again, when you talk into the financial planning space, again, we'll get more into the election later. You got to be very careful to make irrational decisions based on things that are happening and out there in the world, and certainly and every 4-year presidential election is one of those things. It's funny, I had a referral this morning from a client of mine. We were supposed to meet tomorrow, and they emailed my office saying, "Hey, I'd like to move this. I won't name names, but they said if X person gets in November, I think the world's going to." A 4-letter word came shortly after that. So I can't tell you how often I hear that stuff from plan participants, clients. Look, it could be true. It could be the first time since our inception that the world does have a problem with whoever wins. But the reality is, and we most know, and we all know that no matter who gets in, they're still going to be good. They're still going to be bad, and you want to make sure you're doing your financial planning not in an irrational type of way. But beyond that, it's been a good market, right? If you're looking at your 401k accounts, you're looking at your IRAs, if you're invested in the stock market, especially in the S&P 500, you've done well, right? For this year, the S&P 500, I think, is up around 22% as of today. The NASDAQ and the tech stocks, which were really kind of driving 2023, those are up 22% as well. So those are kind of in line with the S&P 500, which is the largest 500 domestic stocks. The Dow, more your value type stocks, that's up 12. gold, silver, that stuff's up 30+%. So again, you're checking your accounts. Especially if your third quarter statement should have come in for most of you, you should be pleasantly surprised if you're in long-term growth-oriented type accounts. If that is the window that you guys find yourself in with your investments, if you have the time horizon. So everything is good on that end. I mean, again, I'm going to go over. Jamie and I will both go over lots of year-end items that you want to make sure that you're doing. Reviewing goals is one of the main ones I tell my clients. Is look, we usually start the year just like we start our workday with X amount of goals by the end of the year. Right? Did we put X amount in the kids' college account? Did we save enough extra in the checking account every month to be where we wanted to be at the end of the year? Are all these things where they need to be? And let's review and see how we're doing. Do we want to plan our holiday spending? Right? I'm some of you know me, some of you don't, but I'm married with a child. Another child's coming in January. I was just telling my colleagues before the call, we just went and bought a car yesterday, so that's a big ticket item. And then we're talking about the holiday spending. Look, we just got a car, we got some new furniture, we obviously got new expenses with the new baby. Maybe we back it off, and of course, that was not well received by my wife. So it's things like that as a family you have to talk through and make sure you're planning for in the fourth quarter. But anyway, so lots of stuff we'll discuss. But I'll throw it back to Jamie, and she's gonna kind of.
Yeah, I actually have a question on that since you bought a car. A question I get a lot is, should I finance in today's environment or should I buy it outright if that is, an option? With rates the way they are, I mean, you're looking at on the low end 5 and change, on the higher end 6 or 7%. So if you are buying a car, what's the, how should you go about like lease or buy? And then if you're buying, do you finance or buy it outright if that's a possibility? What's the rule of thumb there?
That's a great question. I would say 0 out of 10 as far as buying cars. I would put myself at like a 7. I know the industry pretty well. I have a lot of friends that are in the industry and how the game is played, right, by the car salesman and what fees are legit and which ones aren't, and what buyback is, and like the amount of spread certain dealerships have to give you, and like what's the invoice price versus MSRP. So like I know a lot of these intricacies, and I actually help my clients kind of navigate when they go into dealerships. And here's what you want to say, and here's what you don't want to say, right? So if you're going to buy a car, especially, there's things that you want to make sure that you're not saying up front. But to answer your question, high level from a lease to buy, again, buying any car, unless it's an antique car that sits in the garage, is not an asset, right? I call it like an enjoyable liability. It's almost like a house that you live in for under 20 years. You're not really making any money on it, right? But again, like I'm going to have 2 kids and I'm going to need to get them around, and there'll be the time, it's a brand new car, so it should be around for a while as much as my wife drives, but eventually it's going to have other kids in it and it's going to get beat down pretty good. But as most people know, let's say you buy a $50,000 car, a week or month after it's off the lot, it's worth 40,000, right? So it's an enjoyable liability, but it's still an asset, meaning that, right, I could still sell it even if it's at a loss after a month or 3 years or 4 years. It's a trade-in value for a new car. So it depends. I would say the main determining factor is how much are you going to drive it. If you just like the new car smell and you're driving under 10,000 miles a year, leasing tends to make sense depending on what the number is. It's just like when you buy a house, you don't want your total house carry cost payment from insurance, taxes, and utilities, et cetera, to be more than like 30% of your net take home. You really don't want a car to be more than like 20. So as far as like the bottom line, whether you're financing it or whether you're leasing it, but again, if you're in the business of buying or leasing a car and you're not sure what to do, I'm a good resource to reach out to because I can really help you navigate how to haggle in the dealerships.
Yeah. Well, that's good, the lease to buy. And then it's do I, let's just say, I've always heard from my father growing up, cash is king, right? You always want to keep cash if you can. So like if it was a 0 interest market or 1% APR, all day I'm financing that all day.
100%.
But what's the rule of thumb? Because I've heard it as, if you can make more than the interest rate in the market, then you should finance it, right? So if the finance is at 1%, sure, I can make more than that in the market, so I'm gonna finance that. I'm gonna pay that 1% and save the money, save the
Sure.
cash because I'm gonna make it, right? But what if it's at 5, 6, 7%? I mean, yeah, the last year was good, but long term, 5, 7 years, should I?
Yeah, so it's how do I put this? It's like when say anyone goes to the anyone let's say someone on the call is I just got my car situation today, but let's say someone's on the call in the market for a car and they just Google should I lease or buy. There's going to be a million articles that'll argue one way or the other. But to your point, Jamie, it totally depends on what the person's situation is.
Mhm.
Uh, like how much cash on hand do they have? Like in my case, right, like is there business income where they can write the car off on the business as far as like a 179 tax deduction and taking the depreciation off the business. There's various things that go into every person's financial situation, whether they buy it or
Yeah.
lease it or not, right? So you
Yeah,
always
and I think it's an important question, like you said, if anybody on this call is going to buy a car, contemplating, like reach out to Brian,
yeah
reach out to your financial advisor, because it's a big purchase. It's
yeah.
probably the second largest right? You got your house and you got your cars, and cars are getting so much more expensive nowadays, right? So it's a big question: is what do I do? Do I lease, buy, and do I finance?
And I'll
So
tell you, these days with again we're streaming on YouTube right now, obviously, but hell, you can just go to YouTube and like just Google it. How do I haggle at a new car dealership? And you're going to get a whole bunch of videos. Some legit. So I've seen some of them myself. Most of them are pretty good. Like they like what to say, not to say. Understanding what the invoice price is going in of what the dealership's paying for the car, what the MSRP sticker is. There's lots of good information that can arm you before you go in. Again, if you don't have time to reach out to me or just want to do some back end stuff on your own.
yeah,
But yeah, it's like anything else in financial planning, buying, leasing a car. It really comes down to the person's tax situation, the income, how long they're going to drive it. Do they like having that new car smell every couple years? So, like my
mhm,
wife we just turned in her lease, and she loves that. She always had leases, and she never really
mhm,
drove them that much.
yeah,
And for her, if you keep really good care of a lease, some people think if you're just leasing a car, you have no equity. That's not totally true. When you actually go to give your lease back, it's
you can buy it
possible
out.
if you
Yeah,
kept good care of your car and it stayed in the garage, you didn't drive it a lot. It's
mhm,
possible the market value of it could be higher than the payoff amount. So
yeah,
you could actually pay it off yourself or
lease
sell
to
it to a
buy.
third party in some cases.
Yeah,
So there's lots of nuances with car buying that
yeah.
people just don't understand.
All good things to think about.
Yep.
So one of the topics we're going to get into, which kind of is in line with this, is the credit building tips. So actually, why don't we talk about that now, since we're talking about it, right? Because when you go
Yeah.
to buy something big like a car or a house, or just getting a credit card. So I have, family members, kids, nieces, nephews, and they're growing into adulthood, and they're trying to get credit cards, and it's tough, right? So if you could talk to us about, how do you, one, get credit, how do you build credit, and how do you, if you're starting from scratch, how do you build credit, and if you're starting from bad credit, how do you get better credit, and then what can you do to protect your credit as well, which is really important.
Yeah. So in this day and age, credit is everything, right? From being the Apple Corporation to someone fresh out of college, right? The First, what is credit, right? Credit is the ability of someone to give you money and the hopes that they're knowing they're going to get it back from you, right? So your credit worthiness is telling a lender, saying, "Hey, if I'm going to give you X amount of money, I need assurances that you're in good standing and financially sound, that I have a really good chance of getting my money back, plus the interest I'm obviously charging you," right? So you need that, right? It's very uncommon, unless you're getting a very big inheritance or you won the Powerball, right? That you're coming out of college or even in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s that you're buying a nice car or you're buying a home in cash, right? It doesn't really present itself. It's nice if it did, but it doesn't, right? So when we make these big purchases, big furniture purchases and cars and homes, your credit worthiness is everything. Because when you go to get a mortgage or you go to get a car loan, I mean, I'll give you a prime example with the car I just bought. Let's talk about first. Let's talk what credit scores are. I mean, credit scores start at like 250, I believe, and they go to 850. So your goal from a credit perspective is to try to get your credit score at 750, some say 800, but somewhere between 750 and 800 plus, and which is the excellent range. So, to your point, how do I establish that? You have to start getting lending, right? So the first best way to do that is to get a credit card. So many credit card companies won't let you get a credit card until you have any credit, right? So it becomes a little bit more difficult. So that's where we coach a lot of there's plenty of credit cards you can get. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to charge you an insane interest rate, right? They're like, we'll give you a credit card, but we're going to give you a low limit and some abusive credit card interest rate of maybe like 35% for anything that's not paid off in full, every month, right? So NerdWallet's a good place I send folks to kind of review all the good credit card promotions, and it always lists a good amount of credit cards you can get without any credit. There's always a good amount of cards out there.
That's called NerdWallet?
Yeah, nerdwallet.com. They've been around forever. I've watched the evolution of their website. Now it's really just a lot of ads because they got a lot of eyeballs there. But 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was a really good wealth of information. It still is, but of course they've monetized it, which, you can't fault them for that. But that's a good website to go to see credit cards that you can get with no credit. And then from there, you can see good promos. Hey, I want one that's going to give me the best miles or the best cash back or whatever that's going to suit you. Because if you use credit cards well, obviously, you're going to get points, you're going to get money back, and you're not going to pay any fees or interest. But the sad reality is about 70% of people that get credit cards, they don't use them like I do, right? They end up paying fees and interest, and that's where credit card companies make a good bit of money. So after you get a credit card, and again, I work with a lot of my clients on this, is you want to keep your utilization rate low. So what that means is if, let's say, you have a revolving credit on a credit card at like 10 grand, you want to try to spend 3 grand or less, a year, about 30% or under of what the credit limit is. You always want to pay it off, the statement balance in full every month. And then you want to be careful. Some people understand that the more credit cards you get, the higher your available balance, the better your credit. But if you go and you apply for like 10 cards at once, that's 10 credit hits, and that's not going to help you, right? You want to try to keep your credit hits, hard credit hits, where they actually run what's called running your credit. You want to try to keep that to 1 or 2 times a year. But if you can work on doing all these things and download an app like Credit Karma, right? It's free, right? They're going to try to sell you other goods and services. You're just going to opt out of those. But many banks now have an app, like my Capital One app has an app, and it shows me my utilization and my my payment history and my hard credit hit. So you can track everything as you work towards getting your score up.
And Credit Karma, again, I just want to put that out there, is a great app. It's free. It will tell you what your credit report is. And there is a question here. I've been hearing a lot about freezing your credit. How does that work? So I have heard this too, and maybe Brian, you can expand, is that, this will prevent people from stealing your identity, right? Because when people steal your identity or you get a card stolen, they can get a loan out, they can get credit cards out in your name, and you are not made aware of it. Well, you could go to the 3 credit agencies and freeze your account, which means nobody can get access to purchase anything or get a credit card in your name until you then go and unfreeze it. So when you're going to buy that car, when you're going to buy that house, or when you're going to apply for a credit card, you go and you unfreeze your credit. And then once you get that loan, you're going to go back and you're going to freeze it. And that is really a good process for preventing that identity theft, which will inevitably, make you lose credit if your identity is stolen.
Right.
Anything else on that, Brian?
No, that's a good point. Again, we'll talk about this later in the show if we have time to get to it, is the massive amounts of scams that are out there now, from AI, from the again, if everyone in here is probably involved with some corporation, I imagine you got to do, we do it. Jamie and I do it all the time, is our monthly email of, the new and latest and greatest scam that's out there, and how to be aware of it and how to see it, make sure you don't fall victim to it. But a lot of those are out there, and what they're obviously go after a lot of times is the credit cards, because they know that they can get a lot of money and run those up quickly versus, if they try to get into someone's bank account, they're not always sure what's in it. So a prime target for scam artists is quite often the credit accounts. because they usually have more juice in the squeeze than trying to not be sure how much is in your bank account and going after those.
Yeah, I'm getting daily, I would say, between text
Yeah.
messages and my personal Gmail account. I get a scam thrown at me like, "Hey, thank you so much. We've processed your payment," and it's from somebody I've never heard of, and the link is odd and weird, right? So one time I kind of followed up because I wanted to see where it would go, right? So I called them. They had a phone number, and I called them. I said, what is this? I just want to make sure that I wasn't charged for something that I didn't buy, or this isn't a mistake. And they said, oh well, just we're going to send you a link. Click on the link, and we'll help you get in. I'll help you to see. I can get into your phone and see, what it is you're looking at, or I can get into your computer. You can share your screen, and I can see what you're looking at, and I can confirm everything. And so then I was like, okay, well, this is where it's going to stop, right? I'm not gonna let you get into my computer or get into my phone. But that's what they're doing, is they're sending just random attachments that look like a paid invoice. So you get nervous, like, where did they, what did they pay? Are they using my account?
Yeah.
And they are, like you said earlier, the scams are rampant, and they're changing, and they're hitting everybody from every angle.
It's a numbers game, right? I mean, ultimately, what those kind of scams, what the scammers are doing is they're just buying lists from on the dark web of millions of emails and popping those out, and they know if they send out for every million, they probably get 100 people to click on them. Right? It's like, and it's just the reality. I mean, it's maybe some are elderly, some that just don't understand these things, and it's just all a numbers game. So the knowledge is certainly power in this regard. I mean, I get the PayPal one all the time. I must get that once or twice a month from some nonsense bogus email that, hey, thanks for your PayPal purchase. I don't even have PayPal, and please verify it and blah blah blah. Right. And obviously, there's not a link there, and I just block and delete the email immediately. I certainly don't click on the link.
Report as junk and delete.
Yeah.
Another question that we had is, do you have tips on repairing credit? So if somebody has maxed out all of their credit cards, what is the next step?
Yeah, so it's fun. I have a good friend of mine that works at one of these credit card consolidation companies. That's really it. When you get to the situation, again, every situation is different. Like we mentioned with, do we buy or lease a car? So again, for the person that asked the question, again, it might be good to schedule a call or something, but let's go over your whole financial situation. Is there other debts, or where are the other assets? What's going on? But ultimately, if you get into the point, and it happens in life where you're up to your shoulders in debts, you look at a credit card consolidation company that's what they do. With rates starting to come down, there might be some juice in the squeeze there. It's probably we still need rates come down a little bit more for those kind of companies to be able to be a little bit more beneficial. But you're looking at things like that that can really help those things. It's really, and then the other thing is, depending on how deep it is, I mean, bankruptcy, sometimes, whether it's Chapter 11, Chapter 7, sometimes for clients, those are just the best way out of a bad situation. If it is debt that can be bankrupted out, right? Some things can't, like certain student loans and things like that. But yeah, reach out to us, and we don't directly do that. Obviously, that's not one of our areas of expertise, but being it's in the financial world, I have good acquaintances at these kind of companies that help people do that.
All right, another good question along this credit topic is, somebody is sitting at over 200,000 equity in their home. So they're thinking about taking out a HELOC for some home improvements and getting a pool, but they are 15,000 in credit card debt. So should they use the HELOC to pay that debt, or pay that debt first and then take the HELOC?
Good question. Again, not to give you the cliche answer. It just depends on everything else that's going on. High level, you normally don't want to take a debt to pay off another debt unless you're really changing the interest spread, right? From a HELOC right now might be in the sevens on a loan, but again, that interest is still tax deductible. To pay off maybe a 35% credit card, right? So if you took out 15 on a HELOC at 7%, which is tax deductible, to pay off a 15Ks in credit cards at 30%, if you were a mathematician, that would make sense, right? If you have 15K in credit cards and you're looking to take another debt out to buy a home improvement or a pool, which again should hopefully increase the value of your property, there's an argument there. But it depends, right? If you're like, what's your run? Well, the main thing I would say is, what's your run rate right now? Like, what's your net income to net expenses in your household? If you're running about a surplus, if you're running about a break even, certainly, or a negative, or just a slight increase, I probably wouldn't take out any more debt until the credit cards are maxed out. And the only way I would take a HELOC is to get the credit card debt gone. Again, if you're really running a significant surplus and you just took out that recently, and you're going to get that at your run rate, you can pay those credit cards off with your savings every month in a couple months. There's more of an argument, right? So it's just a matter of running the numbers in this situation. So again, whoever that is, feel free to reach out to us. Again, during the thing, I think Kelly is sending out our information, but it'll certainly be on the end with our QR codes to get on my calendar and give us more details, and we can shoot you in a more detailed direction.
There's a couple questions on high yield savings accounts. Like, what are your thoughts generally on high yield savings accounts, and do you know of any banks or credit unions that are higher than others? And on the same topic, what do people use high yield savings accounts for? Is this short term, emergency savings? What are the rates they can expect? What's the rule of thumb as to how much they should have in a high yield savings account?
It's a great question. So in the last, most people are on the call, I'm sure, are familiar. In the last couple of years, interest rates spiked to 23, 24-year highs, right? So I think everyone probably remembers 4 or 5 years ago when banks were paying you 0.5%, 1%, right? So in most of 2020, in all of 2023, some of 2024, a good high yield savings account, I know because I have several of them, was paying 5.5% with FDIC insurance, fully liquid, right? So, well, Brian, how are those banks able to do that? Well, you look at the Bank of Americas, the Wells Fargos, some of the big national banks. They generally don't pay much on cash, right? It's just not their business model. Plus, they also have a lot of overhead, right? They got salaries, they got property insurance. Sometimes they own a lot of their buildings. They got marketing. They got a lot of other expenses that some of these online banks don't have. So the online banks a lot of times have a little bit more juice in the squeeze. They can give you a little bit higher rate, and that's the business that they're in. They're not really they're not lending, or they're not doing this. Their goal is just to get money and they know they're going to get it, right? If people have 2% at Bank of America and they're offering you 5.5%, and they do enough marketing, they're gonna get the revenue and be able to make a profit on that, right? So in the last 2 weeks, though, the Fed has dropped interest rates by 0.5%. So I know, like, UFB Direct is one I send folks to all the time. I have an account there. They were 5.5% for the longest time, and since the Fed dropped interest rates 0.5%, they're now at like I got an email the other day. They're at 4.8%. SoFi is one I have. They're online high yield savings, but then they have a whole bunch of other arms too with student loans and everything else. But they dropped, I think, to 4.7%. So again, there's still value in the high yield savings arena, right? Versus just putting it in the bank. Normally, what I tell folks is 3 to 6 months of expenses in your Bank of America or your brick and mortar bank, and then the rest up to obviously the 250,000 FDIC limits in a high yield savings. At least still right now, and we'll see how that progresses over the next few weeks, months, because the Fed, or the projection for the interest rates, is they're supposed to go down another 1 to 2% over the next year. We'll see how that pans out. But if that happens, obviously those high yield savings accounts, your CDs, all these kinds of things, the rates will continue to decline.
That's great information. Going back to the credit. So did I hear you correctly about the 30%? So if I have a credit card with a limit of $10,000, I should only spend $3,000 and then pay that off at the end of the month?
That would be your best. That would be a good situation.
Okay, I personally am doing that wrong.
Yeah. If you have Credit Karma and you can go in there and see your utilization rate, and they have like A, B, C, D as far as like what it should be, as far as like how much it's affecting your score. 10% or under is an A.
Oh.
So 10 to 30%, I believe, is a B, as far as just on that one utilization.
Okay. I just thought I needed to pay it off every month and I was fine. I didn't realize I shouldn't get to like where the max was.
Yeah. So you're
Okay.
not, so that if you're, I tell client, if you're getting to the point where your utilization is, 40, 50%, Brian, I pay it off every month and I want my points and my cash back. And there's no,
Mhm.
I want my credit protection. There's no point in using a debit card. I totally agree with you. But that's when you call up the credit card company and say, hey, without
Increase.
a credit card, without a hard hit, can
Mhm.
you raise my limit from 10,000 to 20? And if they
Okay.
see, and they see if they based on them seeing, most of the time they'll see your spending and your payment, like, oh sure, we'll up it. And if in cases that they don't, you go out and you apply for a new card.
Okay, great tip. Okay, that was the second part of this question is if I'm hitting that 30% or 40% every month, but I need to spend more that I can pay off every month. Is it better just to use my like my checking account, like a normal debit account, or should I open up another credit card with like a $10,000 limit and charge 3,000 there and pay that off every month?
Well, so if you're diligent to pay off your credit cards, the credit card answer is the way to go,
Huh.
right? Because if you use a dollar out of your checking account to, a good and service is 1 for 1. You're not getting anything, right? But you're getting 3 for 1 airline points or 2% cash back or whatever. You're winning in that scenario. So ideally, you'd want to use your credit card again. Personally speaking, right? You listen to like a Dave Ramsey, he'd be like, "That no, you use your bank." Again, so there's lots of talking heads out there, but from a financial standpoint, he says that because he knows that 70, 80% of Americans are going to get that extra credit card and then just start buying more than they should because they can't. One of the downsides with not
Right.
paying with cash is you get the swipies, right? You start
Gotta
swiping so
be,
much and you lose
yeah,
track of what you're
you must
spending,
be disciplined.
and then you fall into the hole. And then once you get in the hole with the credit card companies at 20, 30% rates, it's tough to dig out of it.
It's
But as,
awful.
as long as you're diligent, yes, go get a new card. And another key when you get a new card is don't just apply online because they're always going to typically hard credit hit and then just give you the minimum that they're going to give you. You always
Mhm.
want to call the credit card company and you want to always ask and tell them you want the highest credit limit you're going to give me after you run my credit, because
Mhm.
sometimes people have it run and they give them like 5,000. So they call and ask them to what the max is. They tell them they got to hit their credit again to do it. So you don't, and then you get 2 credit hits. So
Mm.
never apply for a credit card never for a credit card online. Call them, and when you talk to a human being, say once if you're going to hard hit my credit, I want the max that you're going to give me,
Mhm.
not the minimum. That goes a long way. So you're not getting more credit hits than you have to get.
Hmm. Interesting. All right. I'm learning a lot today. So there's a question about 401ks. I'll take this, but it's the question is take advantage of your company's 401k match. So what I think you're asking is if you're maxing out the company match. So let's say your company matches 100% to 5%. You put in 5%, you get the 5%, and then should you contribute to the Roth to reach your maximum deferral? Is this the best strategy? I don't know if your question is specific to the Roth or not, but I would say maxing out uh, the deferrals at the 23,000 is going to be the best bet. So yes, you definitely want to defer up to the maximum company match for sure, because that's free money. You never want to leave that on the table. But then if you're considering, well, should I save the rest of the money in the 401k or should I, save it in my own personal IRA? Generally speaking, again, high level, we can look at your individual situation more carefully. But generally speaking, your company's 401k, because it's institutionally priced and it's going to be a lot larger total plan assets than your individual IRA, it's going to be a lot less. So there's, a lot lower internal investment costs, administrative costs, etc. So typically it's going to be a better option to max out your 401k. Now, if you're asking, should I do pre-tax dollars or Roth? That's going to be dependent on your situation, which we can help you with individually. Brian, do you have any kind of rule of
Yeah,
thumb
well,
with
I would say,
should I
look,
do Roth or pre-tax?
the old adage of death and taxes, right? So we all have to pay taxes, and whether you give pre-tax to the 401k and pay taxes later, or Roth and pay taxes now, depends on your tax situation. So, like one of the things you want to do in the fourth quarter, if you have a CPA, is you want to get with your accountant now and start doing tax preparation and say, hey, let's look at our charitable giving. Let's look at me maxing out my plans. Let's look at doing other things to minimize my tax liability before December 31st, because a lot of things stop at December 31st, to make sure I'm doing the best thing for my tax situation. So for this person's question, the best strategy is really dependent on what your current tax situation is. If you're a high income earner, I'd probably use all 23,000 for pre-tax, and then if you're still able, I'd do a Roth IRA and or backdoor Roth IRA, depending on if it makes sense. So it really depends on what the income and the tax situation is.
Mm-hmm. So on the topic of 401ks, because we are in Q4, so it's a good time to think about what the maximums are and what you can contribute. So for 2024, the maximum is $23,000 with a catch up if you are 50 years old or over, turned 50 years old during the year of 2024, you can put in an additional $7,500. So if your employer does allow for Roth contributions, you can contribute that full $30,500 if you're over 50. All pre-tax, you can do it all after tax in the Roth, or you can do a combination. So again, if you think your tax bracket will be, tax bracket, typically taxes don't go down in my experience, they always go up. So, oftentimes a Roth might be the best option for you. Pay taxes now. That way it's going to grow tax free. And then when you do retire, you get every dollar out tax free. You don't pay taxes on the gains, and you've already paid the taxes, 10, 20, 30 years ago on the income. So something to certainly consider and talk to your financial advisor and your tax advisor about. IRA limits, if you fund a separate individual IRA, is at $7,000 for 2024. If you're over 50, it's $8,000 total with the catch up. So you're going to want to start, making sure that you're calculating appropriately, maxing everything out, taking advantage of tax deductions with your 401k, IRA, your HSA. Don't forget your HSA, triple tax-free investments. Highly recommend, if you're offered an HSA, that you defer to the max, because you're putting in pre-tax dollars that grow tax-free and you get it out tax-free. You never will pay taxes on anything from that HSA unless legislation changes. But right now it's triple tax-free, and we all know we're going to have health cost expenses when we retire. And so that's another avenue of really saving for retirement to pay for medical expenses. So really good time to review all your maxes, review your portfolio. You should, if you haven't done it in a few years, review everything, review your wills and your trusts, and, look at when was the last time you reviewed your wills and trusts? Maybe when your kids were, born, maybe when they were 2 and 4, and now they're teenagers like me. So I'm going through this right now because things have changed. So it's just a good time, and it takes time, but spend the time on yourself, spend the time to do the review, and make sure that this is morbid, but we'll say yesterday, because we're all here today. Yesterday, if something happened to you, everything's going to be taken care of. People know where to go, and everything is in its place.
Yeah, and on that, the biggest thing I tell clients that we need to review, and most of my clients, a lot of times, my CPAs will do the taxes, so we're well integrated, or they have a CPA and I'll work with them. But tax mitigation is really everything. You get taxed on the money you earn, you get taxed to spend it, you get taxed on the items you already own. Taxes are a problem, right? They're the biggest line. If you imagine as an individual, you're a company, your biggest line item is taxes. Like you're paying payroll taxes, you're paying ordinary income taxes, you're paying sales tax, liquor tax, rain tax. I'm just pulling out various rain taxes in my state, but the taxation is bad. We'll see what happens in November with taxation. But again, people talk about taxing the unrealized gains on people over net worth of 100 million, and all these various proposals that both sides have put. Ultimately, personally speaking, and I'm not trying to get into politics here in a political year, But my hard belief is always it's not a tax problem; it's a spending problem. When the local, state, and federal government spend the way they do, you could tax everyone 100%. It's not going to matter. They'll find a way to spend triple the money that they're bringing in and just print more dollars. So tax mitigation is huge. So make sure you're getting with your accountants. You're reviewing. Am I maxing out my plan? Am I getting my deductions? Should I look at some rental real estate? Should I do some other things to really lower in a legal way that tax burden that I have? Because those are things that are controllable. Like if you have brokerage accounts, I think it's 385 of the 500 S&P stocks are in the green this year. We've had a good market year, but there's still plenty in just the 500 that are down, and there's plenty in the that are not in the S&P 500 that are down. Review your non-retirement accounts. Maybe you sell some of those losses and take those losses on your taxes. Somebody asked a question down here. If I do debt consolidation, I heard it messes up my taxes. That shouldn't have anything to do with your taxes. So I wouldn't be worried about that there. Maybe feel free to let me know what you're doing. Someone else asked a good question. Should I buy out a lease? It's funny. I just went through that with my wife, but her buyout value, I'll just use the numbers. Her buyout value when her car was 38 grand. And it was, if you just Google the VIN number and in great condition of like on Kelley Blue Book, it was like 35. So for her to buy that out, she basically there's no equity in it. If there's equity in your car or you love your car and it's close to the equity, that tends to make sense to buy it out. But other than that, it usually doesn't. So again, that's on a case by case basis. I think we had an IUL question. What's your thought about an IUL? So what an IUL is, for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's an indexed universal life policy. So it's life insurance. And look, I sell all the kinds of life insurance. I'm certainly not a life insurance sales guy that's pushing it. But that's one of those ones that I do tend to see pushed more than others. I always see YouTube videos on it and Facebook ads about, hey, be your own bank and open an IUL. There's some validity to that. And again, I have a good amount of clients with IULs. They just have to make sense in conjunction with everything else. Again, I would typically say from a high level, an IUL normally doesn't make sense if you're not already maxing out like your IRAs and your 401ks first. A lot of people, like an insurance sales guy, a lot of times, not that there's no situations when that makes sense, but they'll try to sell you one that's a better investment than a 401k or an IRA, especially with a match. There's no math to support that, right? So it has its case for a tax-deferred retirement income type of a vehicle. But again, whenever you buy an insurance policy, especially life insurance, the book and the binder is like this big. It's like 70 pages. So all the IULs from all the different carriers, and we use them all, they tend to be a little different. So they can be good and they can be bad. It just depends on how they're placed and what the situation is.
There's a couple questions about taxes and IRAs. So I think I can help clear this up. So a traditional IRA, it works the same way as a traditional 401k, where you are going to fund it with pre-tax dollars. So you're getting a tax deduction today. You're not paying taxes on the dollars you put into a traditional IRA or the traditional provision in your 401k. Okay, it's going to grow tax-free. So every year you're not paying taxes on the gains. It's just growing and compounding. At retirement, at 59 and a half, when you take money out of the traditional IRA or 401k, you will pay ordinary income taxes on every dollar that you take out. So there's no difference in, the capital gains versus ordinary income. You're paying ordinary income on everything that you take out because you have not paid any taxes on any dollar that you put in. Okay, so the difference is on the flip side with a Roth provision in your 401k or a Roth IRA, you're going to pay taxes. You're going to fund those plans with after-tax dollars. Then it's going to grow tax-free, just like the other IRA, 401k. It's going to grow and compound tax-free. At retirement, when you take the money out, you get everything out tax-free. You're not going to pay ordinary income. You're not going to pay capital gains. You pay no taxes. You're going to get it all out tax-free. So I hope that clears up the question on the IRA. Anything to add on that, Brian?
Well, yeah, it sounds like you answered it pretty good. I mean, I would just add that how do I put this? I'm one of my credentials in the retirement space is being retirement income certified. I took that, a couple classes years and years ago. As far like I see in this question, it's written as, how does it work when I want to retire? I need X amount of dollars monthly. How do I take out efficiently? A lot of things will dictate that, right? So financial planning is always it's I always quote like Stephen A. from First Take. It's fluid. It's a fluid process, right? It's not. We could make it. Let's say you're going to retire in 5 years. The plan I have from you drawing out of your IRAs or 401ks in 5 years may not be the case 5 years from now, right? Taxes could change. You could decide to work longer. You could do part-time work and not need as much. So where we pull from and how we pull from it is something that we have to change along the way up to that, in my example, 5 years. So it really, but yeah, the one thing you definitely don't typically want to do is just like cash out a large traditional IRA or pre-tax 401k, right? Because then you're going to really jack up your ordinary income tax marginal amount, and then you're going to owe a lot to the IRS all at once. You obviously want to spread that tax out to your business partner, i.e., the government at over time. So again, it depends on. That's why financial planning is developing a plan, right? We develop a plan, but then we have to monitor that plan as we go forward for, again, changing taxes, right? We have the sunset estate stuff coming up in a year for estate taxes. Everyone's on edge about what that's going to do. All these new tax proposals that Harris and Biden or I'm sorry, Harris and Trump are putting up there. We have to just kind of wait and see what happens, and then we kind of adjust from there.
Thank you. So we talked about, I brought up the living wills and trusts and getting all that planning in place. Brian, what's typical cost to get a will and get a estate planning trust? Like what's the range, and where can I go if I want something, kind of quick, dirty, easy, maybe simple, maybe I'm not very complex, but maybe I do have a more complex situation. What should I do at that point? And what's the appropriate cost?
Yeah, so I really push estate planning. Again, just as about I'm an accredited estate planner on the financial advising side. I'm in Maryland. I'm on the Maryland Estate Planning Board. Big estate planning fan, and never more so than after the COVID years, because all these probate attorneys and the judicial systems are so backed up that it's taking years to close estates. So by doing, again, estate planning is, a lot of people think it's morbidity planning. It's really legacy planning, right? Like, do you want the assets to, how do you want them to be passed down to the next generation? Do you want it to be quick and easy, or do you want it to be long and painful in an already, obviously tough time for the family, right? So it's extremely important, never more than these days with how backed up the courts are. But there's kind of there's a less expensive way to do it and a more expensive way to do it. I had a client the other day. She's single. She has no kids, no heirs. But she doesn't, she wants it to go to, brothers and sisters and stuff, or nieces and nephews, but she just needs some basic stuff. So, there's an outfit I use. It's called Wills and Trusts. You can go there, or I send my clients there and they get a discount because it's kind of like one of those advisor platforms.
What is it called?
Or Trust and Will. You can just Google trustandwill.com. Okay. There's wills.com, legalshield.com. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these. You can do like a basic wills, powers of attorney, medical directives, those kind of your basic documents for usually a couple $100, right? They're going to be very boilerplate, but in some cases that's fine. They're going to be legitimate. They're going to be recognized, but they're going to be boilerplate documents. But the big thing is that they're in place and that they're, legitimate. A lot of people do like holographic wills and they write them out at home, and they're not initialed by a witness and a third party. They're not filed with the state, or nobody knows where they are. And a lot of times they're not valid, which that obviously defeats the purpose. But that's a way to get them done in a valid way for a low cost. And then again, once you add in the trust type of deal, and or you go to an attorney to get a non-boilerplate document, you're usually talking, depends on where you live, right? I mean, if you're in the heart of DC, or you're in maybe another state that's less expensive living, it's going to dictate the pricing a little bit. But normally for just basic will docs, it's probably double the cost, maybe about $1,000, $2,000 for the docs that are non-boilerplate. But then once you get into trust planning, whether it's a dynasty trust or a special needs trust, or I think the question here was just a living trust, probably like a revocable trust to put the house into, the car into, in case something happens, that stuff goes around probate and goes to the heirs. Usually you're talking, depending on the part of the country, 2 to 3 grand additional for the trust, because again, it's time consuming, right? Because the attorney has to sit down with you and say, look, what are the wishes? What the wording matters on these kind of trusts. So, it shall pass, it may pass, it must pass. Just trust me, from an estate planning perspective, there's time involved there. And then once the document's made and it's in force, then you got to retitle all the law firm's got to retitle all the deeds for the house and the car into it. So really, you're just paying for the time of it being written up the right way, and then the time to fund it properly.
Excellent. All right. Did I miss any questions to address?
I just saw another one come in. I'm almost at retirement age in about 2 years. I have my 401k, basically the savings account, because it seems like every time I put back money, I lose value. I'm afraid of losing all my retirement money, but I've always invested myself, so I wasn't losing money paying someone else to do so, and I hope they don't lose it all for. Oh, and maybe there wasn't a question in there. I guess it seems more like a statement. But look, the stock market's up and down, right? I always tell clients there's variable and non-variable investments. So a lot of times we have millions of participants in our 401ks. Someone will get on my calendar and they're a year from retirement, and I'll look at it. And it's in all various mutual funds, and the allocation looks pretty good from a portfolio perspective. And I'm like, look, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you realize none of your money is protected from losses. And they're like, oh my gosh, what? Like, no, I didn't realize that. Like, mutual fund, unless it's like a money market mutual fund, which technically still isn't totally protected from losses, but whether it's a stock or bond mutual fund, there's going to be inherent variable fluctuation there. So as you near retirement, you certainly want a certain amount of money on the sidelines in non-variable investment, cash, CDs, the 401k fixed account, those types of things. So again, if you need 50 grand a year and you have 5 million saved, you probably put it all in cash. That's probably fine, right? I mean, most of us don't have that luxury, but if you have plenty of money for what you need in your life expectancy, there's no need to take the undue risk if you don't have to. But again, it just depends on the situation. Most of us still need a certain amount of our retirement dollars at retirement in long-term equity type positions so we can keep up with the crazy inflation that we continue to see. Let's see. Any advice for someone who's late to investing and is only 15 years before retirement?
First, never too late. 15 years is a long runway.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's like the end of that movie. What's it? Matt Damon's in when he like lands on Mars. I can't think of the name of it, but like, it's one of his quotes at the end of the movie when he's the one goes to Mars and gets stuck, and then they figure out how to get him back. I forget the name of the movie, but he at the end of it, he's giving a speech to kids about how he was able to like stay alive, and he's like, you just begin. You solve one problem and you go to the next, right? So you just begin. Get in your 401k if you have one, or if there isn't one, get into an IRA, assess the budget, and just begin. Just start adding and always set up automatic, right? If it's based on, I'll try to get $50. I'll try to log in and send $50 every month. No. Right? Set it up automatically out of your paycheck or automatically out of your bank to an IRA or something. And again, you can always change the amount on either one. You're not locked in, but you need that automatic cadence going. And again, it's not just investing to retirement. In this case, maybe 15 years. The average, with health advancements, you can make a decent argument that you might live. Some of us, knock on wood, we might live as long as in retirement as we've worked. So you need to invest in. It's not just investing to retirement; it's investing throughout. So your investment horizon is not just 15 years. Hopefully, it's 40 years, right? So you just got to begin and get into the right places and utilize good resources like us or a personal planner, and just get a plan and just hit the start button.
That's good advice.
What else do we have? You mentioned HSAs, right? Make sure you're trying to max those out by the end of the year. Those are the best, triple tax free, right? Tax deduction in, tax free out if used for qualifying type things. FSAs, for those of you who have those or your spouse has those, check your FSA guidelines, but normally it's by the end of the year or some date in early 2025 to use those dollars before you lose them. Make sure you guys are doing that. Again, I know I've harped on it 3 or 4 times, but make sure you're getting with your accountants, doing your tax assessment to try to lower your tax liability. I know we're coming up on the end here. Remember pumpkin spice, right? Pumpkin spice is your credit code for your employer credit. So for those of you who join late, pumpkin spice is your code to make sure you're getting your credit points.
If you can put up one more time, Kelly, put up our email and
Yep.
a phone number maybe that somebody can call if they have any questions or want to schedule a one-on-one meeting with one of our financial advisors.
Yep. And then again, I was amazed we didn't get too much. I'm amazed we didn't get too many. Again, we don't want this to become a political podcast in the fourth quarter, but I'm
Yes,
surprised.
everybody behaved themselves today.
One comment had to do with the election, which I'm happy about. We didn't have to really get into it too much there. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what that does, right? I mean, it's not just the president. There's lots of seats up for elections, so in the House and the Senate. So we'll see how everything lands, and maybe if one party can get control of all, but we might actually see some more things get done. But we'll see. Let's see. We got another. I'm currently 47. Plan to retire 67. How much should I need for retirement? Again, very broad question, right? What you need in retirement, put it high level, because I do a lot of one-on-one meetings with our participants to come up with a number, because in order to have a plan, you need what point B looks like. And in order to have a point B in retirement, like what's my number, right? What's my number I need to get saved in my 401k, IRAs, etc. Take whatever you're spending today, right, to be comfortable. Assume like if your house is going to be paid for, you can let that fall off. If you have kids, that'll be hopefully taken care of, right? But what you're spending on your house carry cost between HOA and insurance, and then your food, your budget, figure a cost for Medicare down the line, but figure out what that happy number of living expenses is. Factor that out at 5% inflation in this case for 20 years, and see what that number is, and then times it by 20. Ideally, that's what you want, or even I say sometimes times it by 15 if you feel pretty confident on Social Security, right? But for every $1 million you have saved, it's about a 5% withdrawal rate's pretty safe. It can be strategized in perpetuity with good success. So every $1 million every $1 million is about 50 grand in lifetime income. So 2 million would be 100,000 plus anything else, right? Social securities, any pensions you have, outside investments, rental real estate. Some people do reverse mortgages, things like that. But that's kind of how you want to get to that number on a quick and dirty. What are you spending today? 5% inflation, and then times it by like 15 to 20 to see where that number is that you're going to need. And again, that's always fluid, right? A health condition could come up, or you move to a more or less expensive area. It really just depends. But at least you need a number now, so you know how much you need to save in order to try to achieve it. And as it changes, you can adjust.
That's a good rule of thumb. The question on the HSA: what can you use the HSA monies for? What can you not use it for?
So the HSA, for anything medical related, right? It comes out tax free. So, your long-term care premiums, your Medicare premiums, your co-pays, deductibles, eyeglasses, foot orthotics, right? It's pretty lenient, right? Like, I have clients that have, aches and pains in their older years. So they're buying, Tiger Balm and Ace Wraps and all these kind of things. Yeah, physical therapy, chiropractic care, all these kinds of things. So as long as you're using it for something medical, and there's always something you can, vitamins, prescriptions, whatever, then it comes out triple tax free. If you use it for other things, then that's where you end up having to pay taxes on it. But I believe after 65, there's no penalty, but there is still taxes. But most of my clients, again, with the way Medicare is and the way our healthcare typically needs are at those older ages, there's always something you can use them for. So All of my clients have no problem finding a legitimate medical expense to use the dollars for in retirement.
Yeah. Well, super. I think we're at the top of the hour.
Yes. Well, look, thanks everyone for joining. Look, this is always a pleasure. We always genuinely hope that you guys leave with some good pieces of information. Again, everyone has some really great questions. Again, we're always sorry as we give the cliche answers. That really just depends on, what's your situation. But again, that's why you have access to us. So, feel free to reach out to us after these, and we're happy to kind of dive down in your situation a little bit more to give you a little bit more, direct guidance. But we'll look forward to seeing you next quarter. And, we appreciate everyone's time as always. We thank Jamie for joining. Hopefully she'll join
Thanks
again
for having
here soon.
me. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.